So welcome back to this free course for YouTube on how to manage your emotions using NLP. And in this lesson, it's going to be a continuation from the last one. We're still talking about the dissociation technique. So if you haven't watched the last lesson in this series yet, I'd recommend you do that now. I'll include a link to it in the description below. But in this lesson, I want to take you through an experience of what it's like to disconnect, to dissociate from some kind of bad experience. So just to do a quick recap first, dissociation is where you step out of some kind of experience inside your mind and you walk away from it and you then look on from almost like a neutral observer's perspective. So we are talking about literally what you're doing inside your imagination here. And the visual for this is if someone was to have filmed your entire day or filmed some sort of experience that had happened to you and you were to then watch the video back, I know that sounds a bit creepy, then you would see yourself as if it was happening to someone else. That's what it's like to do something dissociated inside your imagination. And generally when you do this inside your mind, it performs two really important functions. First of all, it allows you to lessen the intensity of whatever it is that you're experiencing. So this is really, really good with the bad events that you have in your life. But it also allows you to look on from a very objective viewpoint and then potentially learn something that allows you to finally let go of that bad event, that bad experience. Usually when we learn something from our experiences, that allows us to, move on, resolve it, and then actually progress with our lives. So that's the quick recap. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this experience over at the whiteboard. So the screen's going to go blurry in a moment, and I'm going to magically appear at the whiteboard and take you through the whole thing standing up. But just before we do that, I want to just prime you by just giving you the steps that I'm going to take you through. So what I'd like you to do for this is pick some kind of bad experience that has happened to you in the past or is something that's potentially ongoing for you. Now, one little caveat, don't pick some kind of majorly traumatic thing that's happened to you. Now, you can actually use dissociation for traumatic events. In fact, dissociation is the mind's natural way to disconnect and handle trauma. But, when you're learning this in the beginning, then I wouldn't recommend that you do this deliberately. I want you to practice with something that is bad, but maybe not quite traumatic. So I'm going to get you to pick something that's bad, some sort of bad event that's happened or something that's ongoing for you. And then I'm going to get you to step out of that experience inside your imagination. So what would that be like if you were to walk away from that experience, way off in the distance, and then look on as if it's happening to someone else? And again, the visual is if someone was to have, filmed that entire event and you were to watch the video back and you were to see yourself as if it was happening to someone else, what would that look like? That's the thing you want to create inside your imagination. And when you step into that dissociated place, what you want to pay attention to is how it affects your feelings. The intensity should reduce. It should have much less of an impact on your feelings, on your body. And then what I'm going to get you to do is something a little bit weird, and that is called double dissociation. And this is where you step out of the you that's watching you. I know this is starting to sound like some kind of, meta science fiction movie, if there is such a thing. But this can be a really important step. And don't worry, I'll take you through the whole thing when we progress to the experience. So you'll step out of the you, watching you, and then look on. So you'll be watching you. I know it sounds super weird, but when you're actually doing it, it's much, much easier. And this again can allow you to lessen the intensity of the emotion. And usually when you get to this place, the emotion practically disappears. That bad experience no longer has an impact on how you feel inside your body. And what I'm also going to encourage you to do at this stage is to look on and learn something from that experience. And usually when you do it from this disconnected, this dissociated space, you can often look at it from a much more objective place, you can learn something, and you can also get some sort of revelation, some sort of realization that allows you to resolve, to let go of that bad experience, and then finally move on. So that's the process. Like I said, I'm going to go over to the whiteboard. It's a wee bit easier to take you through it from there. So I'm going to head over there just now. I'll see you shortly for the experience. So that is the setup. So what I'd like you to do is I want you just to take all the time you need just to settle yourself, whether you're doing this standing up or sitting down. And if you want to close your eyes, you can do so now. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just very, very briefly start to think about this bad experience you've had in the past. And I want you just to conjure it up inside your mind. Start to see what you saw, hear what you heard, and just begin to recover some of the feelings you felt. Now, I don't know what that experience is, but I just want you to take a few moments right now just to go back into it, to remind yourself, and very briefly to relive it. Now, I don't want you to almost like kind of drown yourself in this. I want you to taste the poison, but not drown yourself in the poison. So you kind of just step into it, just notice what it feels like. And then once you've noticed what it feels like, once you've briefly saw what you've seen, heard what you've heard, and you're feeling the feelings, those bad feelings, I want you just to do something very specific inside your imagination. I want you just to begin the process of disconnecting. Because when we are associated, when we're in these bad experiences and reliving them, we tend to feel the feelings more strongly. Whereas when we disconnect, when we dissociate, that gives us that breathing space. It allows us to disconnect and look at it from a dispassionate place. So what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you just to step out of that memory, almost like you're stepping out of yourself. And you can walk far, far away, kind of like you're a neutral observer. And if you were to like film this entire experience and then watch the film back, what would you see? What would it be like just watching that you over there having this bad experience, this experience that you didn't like at the time? And I want you to really sort of walk away from it as far as you need to do so in order to get that distance. Some people even like to almost like put a plexiglass screen in front of them, just so that they know that they're looking from this objective place. It's kind of like they're looking from an observer booth, so to speak. And I want you just to do anything you can inside your imagination to make this happen, just to walk away, step out of you, and watch this experience as if it's happening to someone else, kind of like you're an actor in a show, so to speak. And as you do so, I want you just to notice what it's like, how it changes the way that you feel about that particular experience. There might still be some feelings attached to it, that's okay. But I want you just to notice how much it's lessened. You could even gauge it, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense was it before you stepped out? Where is it now? And as you kind of look on from that dissociated perspective, I want you just to add in another step. I want you to almost like double dissociate, and this can look a little bit weird, so just do the very best you can to imagine it. If you're struggling, that's okay, just do the best you can. So this is where you step out of the you that's watching you. Gets a bit weird. So you step out of the you that's watching you and walk further away. And you just kind of look over and you see you watching you over there having that bad experience. And often doing the second step just gives you even more distance. And often people say that they get this really nice kind of release. It's like, amazing, I've now got space. I've now got some distance between me and that bad experience. And they can start to go into that much more objective place. You might even look on and start to kind of consider and go, what is there to learn here? Or maybe not. You might just enjoy the experience right now of just, feeling that release and feeling that relief. And once again, you can gauge it. What was the number in terms of intensity when that you was in it? What is it now? Now that you're watching you. How much further has the number come down? And then the next thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you just to imagine almost like floating up out of your own body, so to speak. And imagine floating way, way up into the heavens, like way, way up, even like above the planet, so to speak. And I'd like you to float up into the stars. And I know this sounds a bit weird. We don't have a spaceship, of course, but we can do anything inside our imagination. But the reason why we're doing this is to just give you a different perspective. And as you float way, way up, I want you just to imagine just looking down at that you, way, way down. And imagine looking down from the perspective of the entire universe. The universe is an incredibly vast place. It's almost impossible to imagine, but just do the very best you can. And what's it like if you were to imagine looking down from the perspective of the entire universe? and how small that one single person down there having that one bad experience, how insignificant that is. And when you do this, it can just put things into perspective, because often when we're having a bad experience, we make it bigger inside our mind than what it needs to be. But when you start to imagine this on the grand scheme of things, on the greater scale, when you start to look down from the perspective of the entire universe, or looking down, as if you're looking down from the stars, all of a sudden that bad experience in the grand scheme of things can just seem really insignificant, can seem really small, and you just get that breathing space. So I want you just to notice what that's like inside your mind. And again, it's a strange thing to imagine. Just do the very best you can. It's about looking on from a different perspective, a much more removed and disconnected one. So wherever you are, what I'd like you to do is just come all the way back down from the stars, wherever you are. Maybe you're in Alpha Centauri, I don't know. And just come all the way down into the here and now, and then eventually, when you're ready, open your eyes and come back to the room. So, welcome back. How are you feeling? A little bit spaced out, a little bit trancy? That's absolutely fine, that's perfectly natural. So I would say, having gone through that dissociation experience, there's two main things you want to pay attention to. The first thing is how the feelings, how your emotions are lessening in intensity as you're beginning to disconnect. So as you're walking away from the experience, as you're looking on from that dissociated space or that double dissociation, or if you're looking up from a more global position, then you want to just pay attention to how the feelings are lessening in intensity, how it's impacting you less inside your body. There is an element here of training your mind, of training your brain. Eventually you can get really good at disconnecting, good at dissociation. So if you ever find yourself having a really bad time, a bad experience, and you're in the throes of that negativity and you're just feeling really, really crappy, you can't really think clearly, then dissociation is a really, really great tool just to temporarily lessen the intensity, go into that much more objective place so you can think much more clearly and feel better inside your body. So eventually, as you practice it, you can get good at it, you can do it quickly, and you can use it almost like as a reset if you find yourself in a bad place. And the second thing you want to pay attention to is any learnings or realizations that come to mind when you're looking on to this experience from this dissociated space. If you recall from a previous lesson in this YouTube series on how to manage your emotions using NLP, one of the reasons why negative emotions can often stick is because we're not listening to them. Negative emotions are not there just to piss us off, just to break our day. They are like internal warning systems. They're trying to make us aware of some kind of important learning. But we often don't see that learning when we're in the throes of that negative emotion because it's so intense, we're not really thinking clearly. So when we step into that dissociated space and then look on, we can start to look onto the experience from an objective place in a way that's much more clear, much more neutral. All of a sudden, we can start to get access to new learnings, new realizations that allow us to move on from that experience, learn something useful so we can actually turn it potentially even into some kind of resource, something that's good. So that's the dissociation experience. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know how you get on in the comments. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do so that you can keep up to date with all future Mind School uploads. So that's all for this lesson. Keep an eye out for the next lesson. It'll be dropping next Monday, and I'll see you later on.